Welcome to Speedrunner Reviews. In this series I analyse games using the mindset of speedrunning and look at the game from three perspectives. First, the casual experience, which is how most people first play the game. Next, the speedrunning experience, including all the interesting tech and how well the game holds up as a speed game. And finally, the tool-assisted speedrun, showing what the game looks like when pushed to the theoretical limit. If you already know this game and want to jump straight to the speedrun part, I've left timestamps in the description and chapters on the video. And today we're looking at Alex Kidd The Lost Stars. Before we get stuck into it, if you do end up enjoying this video, please consider subscribing to keep up to date, as it helps out the channel a whole bunch and I have a new video up every fortnight. So this game is called Alex Kidd The Lost Stars. It's a bit ambiguous in naming. First of all, it is Alex Kidd rather than Alex the Kid. On the cartridge it says Lost Star, on the title screen it says Lost Stars, so who knows what this game is actually called. But if you ever wanted to play just like a normal video game, this is pretty much just a normal video game. It's a standard platformer, you work through 14 levels, and it's a whole lot of fun. This game itself was actually based on an arcade game of the same name, but ported to Master System, which is the version most people seem to be familiar with. And a lot of people, when they see the Alex Kidd series, tend to compare it a lot to Mario, and you can kind of see why. Generally, the first game in the series, Alex Kidd in Miracle World, gets compared to Mario, but I actually think Lost Stars is a little bit more like Mario because it's more linear and just less gimmicks overall. So although the game came later than Miracle World, it is a lot simpler and it's basically just a linear platformer, although it does have some cool features like very real voice sampling for the Master System.
I'm the Miracle Ball!
And this also includes a concerningly realistic scream when Alex gets hurt. While those voice features seem standard now, I'm sure they were very impressive back when this was released. You pretty much play through the game with standard levels, and you just got to get to the end and get past like a boss character sort of thing. In the first level, it's this guy who shoots music notes at you, and you just got to try and get past it. You can actually get an attack upgrade, which is something I didn't know as a kid. And the way that you get attack upgrades is just by getting these S blocks, and then you can shoot projectiles in front of you. I guess as a kid I just tried pressing the shoot button and nothing happened at the start of the level, so I didn't bother trying it again. And the fun thing is you can play this whole game pacifist. Although I really have to say that if you do use the shooting upgrade, it does make the game a lot easier, so this is probably why I had a bit of trouble playing it as a kid. Along with the shooting upgrade, you can also get a jumping upgrade for J. I always thought this was like a jack card from a deck of cards when I was a kid and didn't actually realise my jump height got higher, but it certainly does. It pretty much doubles your jump height. It helps you cross some gaps, and even in a situation like this, just saves you waiting for a platform to come down to where it needs to be. In fact, if you have the jumping upgrade on this level, you can literally just skip this entire cave by jumping over the top. The other upgrade to mention are the SC upgrades, but this essentially just restores your health. This game functions a bit like Wonder Boy in that your health gradually ticks down with time, and also when you get hurt by an enemy, and you basically want that bar to still have something on it by the time you get to the end of the level. If you're playing this game in a speedrun setting, you actually want to end the level on very low health because it takes time for the health to tick down at the end. So there's a little bit of a trade-off there. You don't necessarily want to get health upgrades, but it's very dangerous not to as well. So as the game plays out through all the levels, you get like an object at the end that you need to collect, and it's usually wrapped up in like a little present. I guess these are the Lost Stars, I suppose, but I really like this second one, which is Oppa Oppa from Fantasy Zone. So if you're into the Sega at all, you'll love all the little references they snuck in this game. There's other gifts like this pumpkin thing too, but I can never tell if it's actually a reference or just some kooky enemy they came up with. Speaking of weird enemies, I find it strange that they put this dude in the game. I found it pretty funny when I grew up playing this game, but I don't think you get it past the censors these days. I also imagine one thing that helps the game do well is just how detailed some of these enemies are. I mean, those enemies lag the heck out of the game, but they're visually impressive at least. Same thing with these jellyfish. I think it might have been a bit too much for the Master System to handle. You also have these cool dinosaur enemies that shoot letters at you. They're pretty easy to jump over, but if you let the letters come out, they actually become difficult. And even though it's spelt differently, it always reminds me of a particular band. So once you get all 6 of your lost stars, you go to Ziggurat, which is like in space. A cool thing about this level is your jump height is drastically increased, even without the jump power up. In fact, there is no jump power up on this level, so I don't know what happens if you were to grab one. It's just basically a space level, but you get to the end and then you're through the game. For some reason you see like the Statue of Liberty at the end, and then you like go up and see all the lost stars that you collected. So a pretty cool ending. I really liked this as a kid and it was satisfying to get up to this point. Although what if I told you this wasn't actually the end of the game? They literally make you play through the entire game twice. These new levels, they're slightly harder than the older levels, but realistically it's basically just like playing through it again. There are very minor differences in how you'll play each level. For example, just damage boosting through the chains of enemies is often faster now because they're pretty difficult to jump over and stuff. But I do suppose you might have enjoyed getting the extra content if you're playing through it back in the 80s, and you get to see this guy again. Anyway, you get to the end of the game, but nothing really changes about the ending. It literally just plays out the exact same cutscene and then says, "The end," rather than throwing you into another loop. Unfortunately, I think this kind of hurts the speedrun of the game a bit because people wouldn't want to play through it twice, I guess. It makes it a little bit boring. But the base 7 levels are really enjoyable, and I guess that second loop is just something you have to put up with. Kind of like Ghosts and Goblins, I suppose. So overall, the game is pretty easy, so you shouldn't have too much trouble getting through it. The only difficult part is sometimes the bits at the end of the level. These little boss things will send you back to the start of the screen if you die, rather than where you died. But the trick to getting past them is just you don't let the screen scroll all the way to the end. So here I'll die, but I'll come back to where I was, and that's because the screen wasn't scrolled all the way to the end of this exit sign. So if you want an easy way to get through this game, just scroll the screen almost to the end until you just see half the exit sign, take a death, and then use the invincibility frames to get through the rest of it. You'll get past pretty much every boss that way. It's useful in particular for this last boss, which is like the sun thing, because it has a hectic pattern. If you just wait under that second G and get hit by something, then you can sort of filter through and use your iframes to get past the rest of it. So overall, it's a pretty fun game. I would recommend giving it a go, especially if you want to just switch off your brain and have a good time with the platformer. Alright, so now we'll talk about the speedrun. I'll admit, I wasn't sure whether to make this video or not because the game is pretty much just moving right for a lot of the time with small optimizations, but hey, this wouldn't be the only interesting game like that. Given the success of something like Mario, I think this is a really cool speed game because you won't save or lose huge chunks of time, you'll just save or lose little things with little optimizations. Originally, the record that I got 7 years ago, which was a 23:14, was pretty unoptimized in all honesty, and there wasn't these interesting optimizations. But the other day I got bopped by Obscure Lifeform, and then just a couple nights ago I took the record back with a 22:30, which was a huge drop. So the 22:30 is the run we'll look at today, but I really do still want to thank Obscure Lifeform for doing a run of this game, which was pretty well optimized. It really gave me some passion to pick it up again and grind the time down lower than I had before. Now the first thing I'll note about running this game is if you slow down a lot. So just before this card here, I do briefly slow down, and you can see it with a bonk on the wall. Alex slows down for a really long time. It takes him ages to sort of get back up to full speed. So anytime you want to avoid slowing down, you can, because you won't just lose a couple frames, you'll probably lose like 0.3 to 0.5 seconds every time you slow down. We have that jump there, but for example, I bonked on the little block and ended up slowing down on it too. Another example of where I slow down is here, and I sort of do it intentionally, but you can really see how long it takes Alex to get back up to full speed. This run sort of consists of a series of jump memorizations. So like here you want to jump off the end, here you want to jump onto the block and walk off, jump off the pink block, jump off the pink block, jump over the dog, wait, jump through this guy. So it's all memorization, and I presume this is a similar feeling to what Mario 1 runners have, where they're memorizing jumps to get through difficult sections, relying more on just that pattern of where to jump rather than dodging things naturally. When you get to the end of the level, you have to dodge this boss, and that puts some variance in because you don't want to slow down too much, but if you hit one of the projectiles, you'll either warp back to the start of the screen or lose time to the death animation. It's worth noting that I will damage boost through some enemies to save time just because it can be really slow to jump through particular ones, but more often than not I'm trying to avoid damage if I can because the death animation takes a lot of time. It's a bit of a trade-off though because the death animation does lower your health, which makes the end of level screen a little bit faster, but it's not usually worth it to take an intentional death for that reason. Speaking of level 2, this can be one of the jankier sections of the game to play casually. For example, this section here with the opening and closing floors has very bad hit detection. And what happens if you fall through? Well, you just fall to your death, so it's not good. You have this section here with the hit detection's a bit better, but it can be a bit tricky to jump over certain obstacles in this level. Especially those platforms which you don't know whether they're going to go up or down if you're playing casually, and the swinging vine with counterintuitive physics. We also have this section coming up where you jump onto the sort of hanging poles, and if you hold the jump button, Alex falls off the poles. You only stay on the poles by letting go of the jump button, so that can be really confusing if you're playing the game casually. Also, I mentioned about jumping in this game, there's only one set jump height, so you won't go any higher by holding the button for longer. Given there's only one set jump height, it actually makes it kind of cool to find setups for where to jump in this game in the speedrun, because you're always going to do consistent stuff if you jump in the same spot. Although level 2 does have some jank, it has this really cool technical section here. You've got to jump underneath this pole on the conveyor belt and jump out. That is incredibly hard to do without slowing down. And when we come back for the revisit of this level, there's actually an enemy past that section, so if you slow down at all, the enemy will hurt you. But here I get it without slowing down and manage to get over the enemy, so the time save sort of compounds on that second visit. Coming into the third level, we start doing some clever jumps over these skeletons. This one's almost worth just damaging through the skeletons, and I find that hidden jump block there. I do this big jump over these swinging platforms, and that saves a whole bunch of time waiting for cycles, because with those platforms, if you just wait around, you're losing like 5-6 seconds. You get the little shot power up and then you continue to plow through the enemies. Pretty much the reason I slowed down for the jump power up before was this bit coming up here. You just jump up onto the top of this ledge, and if you don't have the jump power up, you have to jump through the center of it, which takes a really long time. And this section here is very technical because you got to like avoid the enemies, do weird jumps that are very precise. It's a bit awkward. In the PB that we're watching, I accidentally got another jump power up, so I had it longer than I was expecting here, and it messed me up. It's a really weird feeling if you're used to playing a level with or without the jump power up, and then it swaps. Underwater level is essentially an auto-scroller. It's pretty boring, in all honesty. For this reason, I've pretty much been wanting to get a good first 3 levels before continuing on with the run, because I don't want to commit to this 2 minutes 22 of underwater boringness. Pretty much all that's involved in this level is a bit of lag reduction here and there. Some of the scarier obstacles, like these jellyfish, you can literally just swim over, although I messed it up in the PB and got hit by one there. And there's a bit of RNG at the end with these jellyfish. Sometimes the jellyfish come down really low and hit you, but other times they don't. So I got bad RNG in my PB for this one. We got this level, and I actually slow down to get a jump power up intentionally. I mentioned this in the casual section. The reason we get the jump power up here is to skip waiting for some platforms to move. Also skip slowing down for this egg, even though I slowed down accidentally there. But basically the reason I get the jump is for this bit. You can literally just jump straight off that and make the jump across, otherwise you're waiting a long time. And also this bit, you can jump to the platforms a little bit earlier. I did mention jumping up over onto the roof before, but that's actually slower in RTA because sometimes you jump slow down, like they get bonked on the terrain. And here you can see we're barely slowing down on the normal path here. I do take a damage through that broccoli fist thing, but that's only because I have the jump power up and it's hard to jump over it without that. This balloon's another example of if you hold the jump button, Alex just sinks down and dies, so you've got to let go when you jump onto the balloon, which is very counterintuitive. You got this as level 6 here, and I can never tell what the background is. It's either pasta, a digestive system, or roses, and I'm never sure which one. Now this has one of the cooler tricks in the run. You'll see me slow down here intentionally. And what that does is it makes the last pillar here load a little bit later, so it's on a different cycle than the other two, which lets me squeeze through and use the iframes to jump through that ball and chain thing. Sometimes you get completely through the third pillar and other times you don't. But if you don't do this waiting trick here, all 3 pillars are aligned in the same spot, and then you have to wait for all 3 rather than just zooming through like that. This level is definitely one of the more technical ones where you have to use your shots to get rid of these water droplets and stuff, and especially in the second visit it gets quite technical because there's more water drops floating around and everything. Definitely one you want the shot for, and definitely one I would have struggled with as a kid because I didn't know that you could shoot projectiles in this game. These platforms are notoriously inconsistent as well, whether they'll spawn or not, and it sort of depends on how many objects are already on screen, so you just gotta watch out for that a little bit. You then got this section at the end. Honestly, this is pretty painful without the jump power up because the jump spacing doesn't quite work out for the platforms, but I make it through in the end. And these four are all on the same cycle there, which is going to lose a little bit of time. If anyone wants a good setup for this end part here, it's when the green blob hits the blue thing, sort of the top left green blob there, and then you can just jump at that point and always get through. We finish on the space level here, and it can be pretty tricky to work your way through. You want very particular jump timing, and there are some spots where you have to slow down unavoidably. Here, for example, you just got to get up on top of that platform, and there's no jump spacing that'll work to get you up there properly. Even the Taz, I'm fairly sure, slows down in that section. But pretty much once you know where you're jumping, it's straightforward to do this level. There are just some pretty tight jumps, like this one coming up in a second, like here. You have to jump quite late, otherwise you don't make this platform. And then the next jump, you have to jump quite early, otherwise you overshoot the platform. So there's a bit of a memory game in exactly where to space the jumps here. We make our way up, but you gradually get towards the end of the level. Weird thing about these lipstick containers is that they don't have a hitbox underneath them, only on the top, so you can just run straight through them if you really want to. I also love that on the revisit they put this middle fire off-center for some reason, even though it was centered on the original visit to the level. And you'll see me doing that strategy where I wait underneath the second G there, and then take a damage to get through. It's very tense this moment in the run, but you eventually make it through and it's all okay. So while there were some mistakes in this run still, I was pretty happy with a 22:30. It dropped the record down by about half a minute, and honestly my summer best there is 22:14. It can come down a little bit, but I don't think we'd be seeing sub 22 anytime soon on this run. I think the tricky thing about this run is that you have to go through the entire game twice, so if there's a tricky section you've got to get through it twice and you can end up losing a bunch of time. It makes it pretty brutal to run this game, but pretty satisfying that you need to gain consistency rather than just relying on getting one good run. I really enjoyed grinding this time down because you just save or lose time in little increments and you can really pull it down close to your summer best. Alright, before we move on to the Taz section, I need to make a quick editor's note here. I was putting together this video and then found out that I got bopped actually by quite a bit. So Obscure Lifeform came back and got a 21:59, which is really quite impressive. It's actually about 15 seconds lower than my summer best. So I wanted to have a quick look through this run and just see where the main time save was, because it was about 30 seconds over my PB. It's pretty much matched all through the first round of the game, these first 7 levels here. So it seems like the first bit of time save comes at the end of level 7 here, just with this boss. Rather than taking a death on the G for Ziggurat, Obscure Lifeform runs straight through and saves quite a bit of time with that. And from what I can tell, a lot of the time save comes from this second round of levels, where there's more enemies and it gets a little bit harder. Obscure Lifeform looks to have put in a lot of practice to this round, especially with this jumping bit with the opening platforms there. The hit detection is notoriously pretty bad, so it's impressive they were able to jump there without slowing down. There's also a few little obvious things I missed, like this bit for example where you take the zipline down onto the dinosaur. You don't actually need to slow down to avoid this egg. I don't know why I didn't realise that, but I was just slowing down before making that jump. They also do a really good job in this second to last level kind of avoiding slowing down through this part. When I was playing it I was getting caught on the ledges and everything because the jump spacing's a bit weird, but they look to have done a lot of practice here for this. And in the second space level here, they're getting past the flames a lot quicker than I was able to, but also once again doing a skip on this little boss sun bit. So I was doing a death warp to get through here, but they were pretty brave in actually doing the section properly, so to speak. And that is a hard section, so props to Obscure Lifeform there. Definitely a super impressive run, and GG on the sub 22. Not only that, but Obscure Lifeform actually found a new glitch, and it's basically an ammo glitch. So when you start the round 2 levels, you just start off with 25 ammo secretly, even though it says you have 0. So you can actually just shoot those card enemies and avoid having to slow down there. So the ammo glitch is not obvious because it says you got 0 ammo, but it only works in this level and it probably saves less than a second, but it would be really cool to see in a future run because to my understanding it wasn't in that record we just looked at, the 2159. This also wasn't known at the time of making the TAS, so in theory we could save just like half a second or something on the TAS with this glitch as well. Alright, so now we're going to talk about the TAS. This was a TAS that I made a few years ago and it was in 2017, so quite a bit faster than RTA, and we'll see why when we get stuck into it. So one cool thing I just noticed is this TAS time is 2017 and I made the TAS back in 2017. Kind of cool. I can't believe it's that long ago that I made this TAS, and it sort of brings me back to being in uni, I suppose, which is when I would have made it. So the TAS starts off pretty normally, just the same strategy as RTA really. Level 1 wouldn't save that much time at all. I do get a little bit braver with jumps. For example, there's a dog enemy here that I'm about to go past, and I managed to jump through the enemy after this without slowing down. For some reason, shooting at the base of the enemy seemed to help that, but I have literally no idea why it works still. Now level 2 is really where we take a drastic turn away from RTA. You'll notice Alex is a bit weird. He's facing left when he jumps, and that's because I'm holding left and right at the same time on the controller. What does that allow you to do? Clip through walls like that. So basically every single cycle with walls moving up and down, I can skip in the TAS just by holding left and right at the same time. Now you would think that holding left and right would be controversial, and well it is. It tends to be a TAS only technique because I'm not sure if you ever tried, but pressing left and right at the same time on a controller is pretty dang hard. Except on the Master System, sometimes it's allowed because there's this company called Tectoy which release Master Systems in Brazil. And some of their controllers are a little bit dodgy, and if you push really hard, you can actually press left and right at the same time. So occasionally in Master System communities this is allowed, and it makes it a little bit more valid to be using in the TAS. But even stuff like the Super Mario Bros. 1 TAS presses left and right at the same time, so it's pretty standard to allow it. And technically you could do this in a run if you just like disassembled your controller and literally pressed it. As we're watching through the rest of the TAS, you won't really notice much different to RTA, except rest assured it is quite different, so there's a lot of lag reduction that goes into it. Pretty much when I was TASing this, I was testing every possible frame that I could jump on and chose jumps in such a way to reduce lag. Generally in games like this, jumping can be faster sometimes because it's not animating Alex walking, it's just animating that one static frame. But jumping at different times just always causes different amounts of lag. And I have some enemy shots in there that will reduce lag too. One other thing you might notice is me sometimes turning around in my jumps. The reason for that is because if you're holding left and right at the same time, you move at full speed. If you're holding right at the same time, you move at full speed as well. But if you swap from one to the other, you do lose a bit of speed briefly. That's the fastest way to slow down without slowing down too much, I suppose. So in RTA, you have to let go of the right button and then gradually speed back up. But in TAS, you can just swap from holding right to holding left and right and lose less time by slowing down. All these little things stack up to this run being about 2 minutes faster than RTA overall. One other little thing I'll mention that I didn't mention in RTA is that holding down or up while you're swimming can make you move down or up faster, so just something to keep in mind if you're playing this level. Now the TAS actually takes the top path over the cave in this level, which is kind of cool. The reason it can get away with this is it can always jump perfectly to not lose speed on this section, whereas RTA you're always going to get bonked and lose a whole bunch of time here. The only weird issue is when you land on the balloon at the end of the cave here, the balloon retains whatever speed you hit it with, so I intentionally slowed down a little bit before hitting the balloon to make sure that I hit it with full speed there. Otherwise going on top of the cave again would be quite slow. But really one of the real reasons the TAS saves so much time is literally just this left plus right glitch. No more waiting for this cycle to manipulate these crushes, you can just jump straight through all of them if you want. And the TAS can do some pretty swanky damage avoidance techniques, although sometimes like there it does still need to take a def to avoid damage properly. And the TAS is naturally going to be faster in some of the more tense sections like the final boss here. Normally I'd stop under the G for ziggurat, but the TAS can literally just jump straight through and occasionally shoot to get rid of the projectiles there. So overall this game, not the most entertaining watch if you're just watching a run, but it is really fun if you just get into the zone and do a few runs of it, or even play it casually. That's going to be all for this video, and thanks so much for watching.